Am I okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Just kidding.
Oh,
There
it
we
is.
go.
Okay.
It's just on a time delay, right? Like the football game last night. Okay, so soft skills for faculty. So you can see that we have some listed on the screen. Now we'll talk about these. I want to hear your thoughts on them. What I would like for us to do starting off, and I'm going to do this too, is I like to call this the 1-minute paper. And so I'm going to literally set a timer like I would for my 6-year-old son. And when I say go, I want you to write about these soft skills. So whatever comes to your mind about these skills listed on the screen and your personal teaching, okay? So I'm gonna have you just brainstorm for a minute. So if you have something to write with, jot down, or type with, I'm gonna go ahead and get started, and I'll give you a countdown as we get closer. All right, my friends, go. All right, we're at the halfway mark, so we passed 30 seconds. All right, so we've got about 10 seconds left. 5, 3, 2, and 1. All right. Yeah, I know. A minute goes by fast, right? I know, but it's not so fast when you're like holding a plank or working out, but that was a quick minute. Okay, so now that you've kind of gotten your thoughts together, who would love to share just some of the thoughts? I mean, and these are just like random thoughts. It's okay. There's no like perfect answer I'm looking for. So what are some of the things that you wrote down seeing these skills and thinking about your own personal teaching? Anybody? Yes.
Be friendly and ask the students about their lives and interests. Guide them, offer advice, ask how they're feeling frequently.
I love that. Yeah, lots of good information there. Anybody else? Yes, thanks.
Just a thought that I had was like, I always try and write a response to an email with like, thank you for reaching out. Thank you for your question. Because it's
Absolutely.
allowing them to have like ownership of the fact that they did reach out, right?
Yeah,
So
I love that.
implementing like that kindness and gratitude.
Absolutely. Yeah, anybody else? Yeah.
I put that as often in conflict with academic rigor. Sometimes students think that if we don't grant them this exception, then that we don't care and we don't empathize. And it's really hard not to sound condescending when you say, I understand your situation, but this is what the expectations are. So.
Yeah, I hear you. I literally wrote down challenging, right? I wrote that down as something that I feel sometimes when I see that, and I absolutely agree. It can be kind of in conflict with academic rigor. Yeah. Any others? Yeah.
It's paraphrasing kind of what I
Okay.
intended to write, but not what's literally on my paper. But with caring, that's like the skills I teach. Some of them are really kind of like technical based, where it's kind of like drill and practice, and it's kind of hard to get excited about it, but they're very essential. But I try to if I care about what I'm teaching, if I can get them to care about what it is they're trying to do, get them to put some kind of personal involvement into it, then the results are just inherently better than if it's something that they're just trying to check off the list.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I'll share some of the things that I wrote, and these I just had like phrases. So important, challenging to incorporate, sometimes hard to remember. This can translate into employability, inherently part of what I do. So those are some of the things that I think about. I'm gonna ask my friend Krista if she'll share.
I thought you might.
Okay.
So looking at students as individuals and treating them with that individuality, meeting students where they are to help them grow as a professional.
Yeah, awesome. Can I ask just a random question. When you see this list here, are there any on here? And I'll explain a little bit where these specific ones come from, but are there any that are listed for you here that you are surprised by, seeing those?
There's some that I think should be listed there, but not necessarily those shouldn't be.
Yeah, well, great. What are the ones that you think we should add? That's a great point.
Equity and fairness.
Okay, absolutely. Any others? Surprised by or could be added? Okay, so just a little bit of background, and Rusty kind of mentioned this, but I was fortunate enough in my time as a FI to get to work on a project, and then when Krista became an FI, she started in on the project too, but Rusty came to us and said, hey, I want to try to do something that has to do with faculty recognition, kind of this thank a professor idea. What do you think? And I was like, this is really cool. And you have to remember that this is in the time of, we're kind of getting out of this COVID, where we're seeing consequences from what happened during COVID and seeing them now as juniors and seniors and graduating, seeing them in upper level classes and all sorts of things, and faculty disengagement, like Rusty mentioned, and this kind of unseen workload, if you will, that we do as faculty. And our first go round at Thank a Professor, I think we had, I don't know, maybe 200 thank yous. I can't quote you the exact number. And then when we did it again last fall, it really took off. And that's because of confluence of multiple factors. But we had over 600 thank you notes, if I remember correctly. And so just in our analysis of doing this project, these are kind of the big themes, if you will, that students tended to thank their faculty for. Kindness was a big one, right? So just for being kind, and that is kindness in welcoming everyone into your classroom, kindness in welcoming people into your office. It could also be something as small as kind language in your syllabus or in your assignments or in your email, as someone shared. Caring, so demonstrating in various ways that students felt cared for, right? And so that could be in a mentor type relationship. That could be just in the way that a faculty member responded to a tough situation that the student may have been facing, and specifically in that class. Mentorship, especially in those more, and I'm in the College of Health Sciences, technical disciplines. I feel like we saw a lot of thank you for your mentorship. Thank you for investing in me. Thank you for your time and helping me. Empathy. While we can't always do everything that our students ask of us or request, right? Because we do have to think about that academic rigor and are they going to be prepared when they leave here? But empathy for what they may be facing, right? And that could be in or out of the classroom. We have faculty in our program that I work with that students feel very comfortable sharing things that are going on with them. And over my 13 years here, I've seen really, really sad things like students are homeless, or they live in their car, or facing extreme family tough dynamics, right? So having empathy for them just as people, right, who are on their journey and here and intersecting with you in some way. And listening. And so that could be responsive and taking a simple poll in class. And if you can, and if it's an appropriate change, modifying something and letting them know that, and they take notice of it. So these are just some of the things that we had noticed thematically that students appreciated from their faculty and their staff. So thanks for doing the 1-minute paper with me. Let's see if I'll get it to go.
Technology is great when it works. That's what
Yeah.
I always say.
So Rusty, what did you do wrong?
Yeah, this is where we give you empathy.
Thank you.
Yes, understanding. Give us grace.
Well, if you saw just how bad I am with technology, you'd be shocked that I get through Blackboard, but I manage. And I even use a clicker in class sometimes, but not this one. There we go. All right, so thinking about our own experiences, what are some of the things that make you feel welcome and included? It doesn't have to be as a faculty member here at EKU. It could just be you as a person. But what are some of the things that help you feel welcome and included? Yeah.
A smile.
Yeah, a smile, right? You don't want somebody mean mugging you. I have a different word for it, but I won't say it here. But I think we all know what I'm talking about, right? With the mean face, right? A smile. Anything else?
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go on the flip side of that because I do have RBF. And
You got
so,
me.
when people are just understanding of like whenever, like, if I'm not thinking of something, or if I'm thinking really deep about something, just because I'm not smiling at you, doesn't mean I hate you. It just means that, so sometimes I'll tell my students, like, if I make a face, it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what I'm thinking about.
I have to do the same thing. Because they tell me that too. They're like, Professor Kimmel, are you mad? I'm like, no, I'm perfectly happy.
I honestly think it feels like it's the adult version of you should smile more
Yes.
to be prettier more, and it's like, it's my face.
Yeah, well, sometimes we're just human, you know, I teach at 9:05 in the morning, and for me, a lot of my mood in class and my demeanor, although despite whatever has gone on in my life, I try to always be happy. In fact, on my Explorers Blue, I often get comments that I'm too happy for a 9:05 class. But you know, how I feel has everything to do with my morning. And so I have a young child, so that means getting him dressed out the door and ready for kindergarten and first grade, you know, I mean, so if he has a meltdown, then that makes me feel stressed, and it's hard to separate who you are and what you are. And then, you know, that comes with me as a person. It just does. So, a smile goes a long way. Thank you for sharing that. What else makes us feel welcome? Yeah.
Someone knowing your name.
Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that
Absolutely.
for all my classes, and I tell my students, even though my memory is not the best, I will try to know all of your names by week 3. And so far, I'm doing good.
Oh, good.
That's great. I mean, think about your colleagues that teach huge lecture classes, like my friends in biology or chemistry, or you teach a gen ed and you have a large section. That is an accomplishment if you know students' names, you know, versus like I have 20 on a roster, right? But knowing something about them, I think when you see them and they feel seen as a person makes a huge difference in whether they feel cared for by you, or empathy from you, or that you listen, or that they can approach you. I also try to learn all my students' names, and I tell them I will say hi to you on campus. If I'm in line at Chick-fil-A over at Case and I see you, I will smile and wave at you. You don't have to act like you know me, but I know you. But I mean, just, you know, knowing their names. And so, look, I'm getting older. And so I am not near as good as I used to be with names. And so we go old school, and in my class, I have cardstock and markers, and I ask them to make a name tag. They can decorate it, they can do whatever they want with it, but I ask them to bring it back. And should you forget, I have more cardstock next Tuesday, because I want to know their name. I want to know about them. What do you think is interesting about public health? What do you think is interesting about what we're talking about today? My discipline is very much applied, and it very much relates to everyday life. That's how, in my lens, that's how I see it. I want to know what they think too. Yeah, seeing them as a person, knowing their name, something as simple as that, yet as challenging as that. I think that's really cool. Anything else? Yeah.
To add on that, because I like doing the name tags too in my class, and I have them turn it in when they leave, and then give them back to them at the beginning of class.
You're hardcore. I can't keep up with that.
I have them write down their preferred names that they want to use with each other, as well as any pronouns that they prefer to use as well. So that way we all know how to address each other if we're having discussions in class, and we can all talk to each other the way we want to be addressed as.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's very important. Anything else help you feel welcome? Yeah.
I don't know if it's so much feeling welcome, but I teach anatomy and physiology, and a lot of
God
those
bless you.
kids. A lot of those kids have to have an A to stay in their program, so they're like.
They're anxious.
Consistently like stressed and tense.
Yep.
So sometimes, especially in the labs that I teach too, I like to be like, let's just take a 5-minute breath. Why are we so stressed? Is it just because you feel like you're gonna fail a test, or is it because you feel like you don't know the material? Because you know the material, and sometimes they're just like, so like, if I fail, I'm done with. So just trying to get them to decompress a little bit and be like, we can work through it if we talk about it, but if you just can stay in the state, it's gonna make things harder for you.
Right, and that's a lot of pressure for them as a student. That's also a lot of pressure for you as an instructor, knowing that ultimately, you know, and it's the grade that they earn, but ultimately what type of consequence it could have for them. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. I know I would feel that way. What are why are these skills so important in today's academia? You know, so my I'll share with you that my dad, who's like 78, he's pretty cool, but he was in academia. He's a mathematician, like calculator, pencil in the pocket, mathematician. My brother is an associate dean at another university, also a mathematician. I know I'm not a mathematician, not even close. But their version of academia and what they talk about, and granted, very different academic discipline is very different than my experience. Now, that could be for a number of different reasons, right? But I think in today's academia, the soft skills are super important just based on the type of student that you're dealing with. And we could take it really close contextually and talk about the EKU student. I remember when I first started, there was a lot of conversation about the like EKU student profile. So we know that our students, even at EKU, are more diverse than ever. They have a lot of mental health stressors. They have serious things going on in their lives that they are balancing. A lot of them are incoming freshman class. I believe the correct statistic is that 50% of them are first generation. That's a big deal. And then we think about, we have these students here. How do we retain them? How do we help them build connections and make relationships and have a sense of belonging all during this huge transition, right? They're suddenly 17 or hopefully 18 years old. They've moved into a dorm. It gets flooded. They move out. Somebody had a speaker from a sprinkler, all these things, right? I mean, but I think in today's world, these soft skills are super important. If you keep up with reading on things about what employers are looking for, then you know that employability skills have a lot to do with soft skills. Doesn't matter your discipline. If you can understand people and you can work with people, then that is half the battle. And that's what I tell my students in public health. You're going to be in controversial situations. You're going to have people that are mad at you for what you're trying to do. You have to learn how to work with everybody and understand. And so I think soft skills are super important. That's why I think they're important. Krista, why do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm in communication, so a little bit different than the discipline than Laurel, but we speak a lot about these soft skills in my classes because communication is clearly a soft skill. I like to call it an essential skill because I think it is absolutely integral to all of our existence. But employers, what we find from them is that they view our graduates as being knowledgeable in content areas, as being technologically adept and having the technical skills, but they're lacking in those soft skills. So the ability to engage in collaboration, the ability to engage in teamwork, the ability to listen, the ability to present to other people, those are critically important. And I will just reiterate some of what Laurel said. We are really looking at some challenging times with students. They have been through a very traumatic experience with COVID, as we all have. They were in high school or junior high when the pandemic was happening, and it took its toll. It took its toll. And if you look at the numbers nationally, we're seeing the increased rates of anxiety and depression among our students. We're also seeing increased number of students who are entering college less prepared than previous generations. ACT scores have dropped the past 6 years consecutively, and that predates COVID. So this is a trend. And so that means students sometimes come to our classes lacking some basic academic and professional skills. They may not know how to attach a file to an email, for example. They may not know how to open up a Google Doc and use it. So these are things that we have to bring into our classes. And I think being able to do that in a way that meets students where they are is really important. And that kind of leads, I think, to our next.
Yes, I
Next
have
slide.
one quick
Yeah, go
story
ahead.
I want to share. Okay, so the soft skills, one of the classes that I get the privilege of in our program is internship, right? So this is the very last thing they do. It's putting everything to work, right? It's very application. So one of my favorite things ever that a student told me, because one of the things is they reflect on their professional growth and challenges and things like that during their internship. And I will just never forget, this student told me that was very challenging because they had to talk to people in their internship. And I was like, well, that is part of life. And that might be a part of your professional life too. So they don't want to talk to people. There is no situation where they want to talk face to face. And so in their internship, they were literally faced with that. But communication is a soft skill.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Just a little bit of a side note.
Yes, yeah.
It's shared with all of my students what my office phone number is as I'm sharing it, I'm like, these students are never gonna call this.
No.
There's no reason.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In that regard, but you know, obviously just thinking about that, like they don't want to. talk.
They don't,
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so that kind of leads us into our next.
There. Oh,
It
for
worked.
you.
Oh, I have the magic touch, I guess. So we're going to talk about some concrete, tangible ways where we can enhance these soft skills in our classes and the practice of those. And we definitely want to crowdsource and
Yes.
use your hive mind. So we'll ask you to share maybe strategies that have worked for you or some ideas. But these are some things that Laurel and I have used over the years with varying degrees of success. And I like to kind of frame this conversation in two ways. One, I think it's really important with our students that we demystify the professor because a lot of our students, they're like, oh my gosh, you know, you're a professor. I'm a first generation student. Nobody in my family has gone to college and I'm so scared to talk to you. I'm afraid to approach you. And of course, that's not what we want. We want students to feel comfortable coming to us when they need extra help and support. So I think demystifying us as a professor is really important. For example, in my classes with communication, I tell them, so how many people don't like public speaking? And, you know, practically everybody in the class raises their hands. And I tell them, well, when I was your age, I didn't like it either. I was that student on the first day of class when the instructor said, we're going to go around and do an icebreaker. My palms started sweating, my heart started pounding, and I hated it. And they look at me and they're like, really? You? I'm like, yeah, I was that person. And it demystifies me to them, right? They see me as a human. Yay, professors are human too, right? Newsflash.
Yeah.
So I think demystifying, and then I think meeting students where they are. I always go back to that phrase. And, you know, we might think that they should know how to attach a file to an email, but if they don't, right? So we have to meet them where they are. So just some ideas that Laurel and I brainstormed. And again, we'll do hive mind in a second. First, do a syllabus audit. Check your syllabus, look for welcoming, inclusive language and seeing maybe where you could swap out some phrases. One thing I like to do is a find and replace, where I have you replace it with we. That simple switch can make a huge difference. And even just in our day-to-day conversations with people, if you swap out we for you, it really makes a huge change. In online classes, I don't know if anybody teaches online, but I think these skills are especially important because sometimes those students need even more support and we're behind a screen. And so sometimes, you know, we don't seem as accessible to them. So including a video greeting in your syllabus for online classes, like let your students hear your voice, let them see your face, let them know that there's actually a person behind this computer who's sending out messages. Kindness and feedback. So yeah, I like to use the feedback sandwich, which we all probably know, right? Compliment, an opportunity for growth, and then another encouraging phrase at the end. So that has worked really well for me. But I really believe in praising small progress with students and acknowledging their work and their effort. And I don't mean that in a way like, you tried, everybody gets a trophy kind of way. I mean, like, I see you're working and I appreciate it. I appreciate your efforts. And students really, they respond well to that, you know, because they realize that you noticed that they're trying. So implementation of feedback. So somebody said that you got constructive feedback on your teaching the first 2 weeks of class.
Yeah, great.
It was great.
Very, very respectful as well.
Yeah.
The student handled it very, very well. So one of the challenges I think the student is encountering is, might be a first generation college student, maybe not, I don't know the backstory.
Right.
But lacking a little bit of perspective on, oh, I'm gonna have to put in some work outside of class.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's okay, you know, I was there at one time. But just kind of learning to convey that, but also take into account what you're
Yes.
saying of, okay, I'd like to see a little bit more that relates to the homework problems that we're
Mhm.
covering. How can you do that in class? Well, I actually designed a lecture where I pulled one of the responses that I gave to the student
Right.
on a homework question. I'm using that as kind of a lever into
Mhm.
another subject.
Right.
And so I'm curious to see how the student will respond to that. I'm hoping that it's,
And
and also the whole class.
I love that your student did that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Students are notoriously honest. Have we figured this
Yes.
out yet? And so they will tell you what they think and what they need to be successful. And I know sometimes we can't always accommodate that. Because if they say, well, I need no homework and no attendance, and that will help me be successful, it's like, well, we can't really do that. But
Again.
what we can do, and I think actually we're approaching a really good time in the semester to do this,
Yeah.
week 4. We're coming up on that quarter mark where we can just do a quick check-in. You can have them do an anonymous Google form, or I usually have them do a Kahoot in class where we do like a word cloud. And I'll say things like, what's working so far in this class for us? What might improve your learning? And then I always say, what can you do to make sure that you're on track for the rest of the semester? And then when I get that feedback, I try to implement it. If they say they want more small group discussion, then we're going to do more small group discussion, right? And I think a lot of this too involves being flexible.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a new teacher, I thought if I didn't cover every chapter in this textbook, then, the sky's going to fall in and it's just going to be a disaster. It's not. They'll be fine, right? Sometimes we have to adapt as we go. So hearing what they need to succeed and trying not to be too prescriptive in what we do and like listen to their expressed needs versus what we think they need. And then building community in the classroom. Laurel and I did a TLI on this.
We did.
Last spring.
Sometime
We did a TLI on this, and we kind of approached it at different points in the semester. So the beginning of the semester, which, we're still kind of in that zone, but we're sort of transitioning out of it. The first day of class we know is so important to set the tone. You only get one chance to make a first impression, as the saying goes. So it's critically important on that first day of class to emphasize the community, to get them talking, to get them engaging with one another, to let them see our human side, so those icebreakers and things. But as we move more toward the middle and the end of the semester, we want to make sure that we're doing that throughout our entire course. So having those midterm check-ins, sometimes I'll just put something in Blackboard where I'll have a Padlet or I'll have a Google Doc, and I'll have 2 options. And one is with the headline that says, here's what I can offer. And the other one is, here's what I need. And maybe a student can offer, cookies and study time, right, with a classmate in the library. So just little things like that can help them build community. And at the end of the semester, I still think it's important, right? Because reflection to me is a big part of education. And if students aren't reflecting about what they're learning, then what's kind of the point? So having them do leave advice for next year's class. And so I always have them do on the last day of class, what advice do you have for next year's students? And on the first day, I share the previous semester's advice with them, and they seem to really like that. And then lastly, clear is kind. Dr. Laura Vance loves to say that. So we'll give a shout out to Dr. Vance, but clear is kind. And sometimes we think that, oh, if I'm being super flexible, then, or if I'm not giving parameters to assignments, that helps students because I want to seem flexible. But that makes them anxious, right? It gives them anxiety if they don't know exactly what's expected of them. So being clear in our expectations, I'm a big fan of TILT, transparency in learning and teaching. Every assignment I give is tilted. So I always include the purpose at the top. They know right away why I'm having them do this, what skills that they are building, and what skills they'll be employing to complete the assignment. I give them criteria for success. What makes a successful assignment? What does this look like? I provide an example of a previous student's assignment, which seems to also really help them too, to see what it actually looks like. So these are some of the ideas that we brainstormed, but from our intelligent hive mind here, what seems to work for you for incorporating soft skills? Do you have any secrets? Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't, it's just in addition to you talking about Tilt. So I've used Tilt for years.
Yeah.
But, I created a new assignment this semester and like students were like pure freaking out on it. Like they were like, it was pure freak. And like, I could not understand because like I kept telling them like, it's gonna be graded on like completion. Like all you gotta do is hit these criteria. I'm not grading on accuracy. I'm not grading on like, and so, I for 2 weeks, I could not understand why they were freaking out so bad. Well, I ended up copying and pasting my assignment into ChatGPT and saying, tell me what's wrong with this. And it helped me clarify. So like, it changed the organization.
Yeah.
And and then it was like, and you need to explain why this is important. So I added, this is why you need to do this. And so hopefully we'll find out. Next week's the first time with the new updated instructions, but they're I love the TEL framework, but just following the framework does not always mean it's clear.
Right, exactly. We have to do checks on ourselves, right? Yeah, it's like, is it actually clear? That's a really good point.
Anything else?
What works for you?
Yeah.
One thing, just encouraging students to ask questions. It's amazing how
Yeah,
just making them understand that, look, if you don't know something, someone else sitting in this room probably has the same question.
yes.
That's something they can say in class and they go, oh, so I can't ask the question even though it's, to me, as a student, seems like it's a stupid question. It's not. It's
Yep.
something that needs to be asked because, and I see this all the time in mathematics. It's like, shouldn't that be this? Well, no, but that gets to a deeper idea and then I can sometimes have more of a dialogue with students. I love it when that happens,
Yeah.
because then I'm not just writing things on the board. I can actually talk to them. So I
Yeah,
like to ask them what they think about what I'm gonna write or what I'm gonna do here next.
yeah.
Sometimes maybe even write what they say, even if it's not correct.
Mhm.
Because I can say, okay, good idea, but let's address how we do adjust this. So
Right,
that dialogue helps.
Yeah.
And asking those questions, it lets them provide some input. I think that kind of goes with the third bullet point there, but it
Mhm.
also helps build that clarity of questions. That's one of the key things we want.
yeah,
Sometimes
do it,
they're
ask them
afraid
questions.
to ask questions.
they are. Yeah, and helping them realize that they're all kind of in the same boat. And when you have that realization that somebody kind of feels the same way you do, you don't feel so alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a huge moment in the class when they have that realization. Other thoughts?
Sometimes when I'm teaching and we start to get into the anatomy, like when we start like kind of defining what bone is what, I see a lot of lost faces. And a lot of them are kind of, I don't want to say scared, but they're a little apprehensive to be like, I'm lost, can you slow down? So sometimes I have them close their eyes because I have a really big class. I have them close their eyes and give me a thumbs up or thumbs down so they don't have to worry about where the rest of their classmates are.
Yeah.
Love that.
I tell my students
Yeah.
all the time, because when I get really excited about something, I talk really fast. I get really excited about public health and I forget they don't know all the things I know and 10 years of experience. And so I'm like, you can always ask me to go back and slow down. Just do it nicely. That does not bother me. You don't always say, you can ask me any question, just ask me nicely. Now, I might say you can find this in the syllabus, or I might send you a link, but you can ask me questions. That's literally part of my job, you know? And believe it or not, most of the time I'm happy to answer them.
Yes.
Most of the time.
Most of
Most of the time.
Not so much, but yes, most of
Right.
the time, yes.
Occasionally, but
Occasionally.
generally we are, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for sharing that.
I'm gonna let you click it because it doesn't work, for me, but it does you. There, see what?
Oh, I went too far. It liked me too much. Okay, now it really likes me. There we go.
Ooh, there,
Okay.
okay.
I'm not gonna touch it anymore.
All right, so in your table, or at your table, could you guys come up with thinking about how your personal semester is going? So for some of you, you can't even get rid of your students. Mine, they run right out the door
Me
when
too.
class is over.
I'm like, I want to be in your
I
class.
don't know why. Anyway, so at your table, I just want you guys to think about like in your own personal classes, right? So maybe you have a class that's going phenomenal. Maybe you have a class where you're like, okay, we need to have a come to Jesus or come to whoever talk. What are two small things that you could do right now in your own classes that could help you? And it doesn't have to be a huge thing. Small gestures are really can make a huge impact. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to chat and then we'll report out. Okay. How we're doing on time. So after this, it's. So we are.
Yeah, so this is where we go.
Some of it might, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's a Friday too. But I mean, like, we're doing pretty well on time, like, we only have 20 minutes left.
Good scenarios and then we can get discussion.
Toss when we come back or when they do are they gonna do a report out?
Yeah.
And then we're gonna do this.
Okay. Yes, let's toss the. Candy catch bars.
Okay.
Me.
I still feel like I'm teaching class. Maybe it's just this Friday. People are tired. I don't know.
Yeah.
Give them like another minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to make sure we end on time and get to the scenario, so.
Okay, like one more minute. The next place. Do you want to ask them to report out and then I can pass on what scenarios? What do you want to do?
Do we want to have each table report out something? Like say one thing that you're, something, yeah. Then, well, yeah, I guess we can pass those out and then have them come up to the front and write under their thing.
Yeah.
And then we could briefly debrief on what they wrote and then. All right, so has it been a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so thank you all for your conversation. We'll go ahead and
Do you
get
want me to use
back.
my loud voice?
Do what?
you want me to use-
Yeah, use your loud voice.
There you go.
There we go. Mom, she has a mom voice. Shut the door.
Yeah.
We hate to interrupt these conversations, so hopefully you can maybe talk about this after in some of your future events. But we thought it would be fantastic if each table could maybe just share out one thing that was mentioned at your table that you think might be good for the group to hear, that we all can learn from. So do we have any volunteers to go first? Otherwise, I'll just kind of go around the room. Yeah, fantastic.
But I like to send out reminders to my students the day before and assignments due, like their quizzes or something, because that's.
Sorry.
I've noticed that if they aren't turning in their work, even though it's on the course syllabus or schedule, just sending out a quick like Blackboard announcement reminder email and the uptick. But then like the kind of con to that is it's also like it's on the course syllabus, it's on the schedule. I give them reminders on the like PowerPoint. So it's like how, you know, like navigating those boundaries, but also still help giving them reminders.
And what Kimmel was really saying, which I think is very profound for everybody in the room, is like, how much extra work does that add to us? And then at what point did the student say, well, you didn't send me 6 reminders, so that's why I didn't do it. Because in some ways, they're just building this idea of like, you're my lifeline, you're constantly going to update me and tell me. But it's also depending on course size, because Kimmy's teaching 35, and I have 10 happy film students. I don't care. Right? They see me, they know me. My job's easy. Sorry, this semester. Oh, this semester.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I set them all up at the start of the semester to go out.
So I like giving reminders because I'm a person that needs reminders. We all have so much going on in our lives, but then like navigating a balance. Like, between that.
I give out reminders. I tell my students, I do my best to remind you, but I'm also like living my best life. So if my kid, we have family in town, like next week we have family in town, I will probably fail to remind my class that has homework. due on Sunday. So I tell them, I will try to remind you, but you know, I also like to live a little and I might not remember to email you. So there is this beautiful table that you can refer to. But yeah, I mean, I try to remind because sometimes I need a reminder, but also like I'm human and I may not get to it in a day. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's popcorn it.
Yeah, throw it.
I mean,
Just toss it.
Just,
Just
no,
talk-
literally.
Oh,
throw it
just
in the
literally
street.
toss it.
Yeah.
yeah, we're just gonna popcorn. Bringing, all right.
I really liked the idea of the soliciting feedback rather than just waiting for it. Christopher's very nice, so they were willing to volunteer it. But I think putting in some intentional time to ask the questions that you want the answers to ask the students is going to be good. So with some upcoming exams or midterms or whatever coming up, I think that's a good time to readjust going forward.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing.
absolutely.
Me?
Not gonna throw it at me?
Nope.
We talked about, making sure to take the time to draw the questions out, because, I mean, I know for me, sometimes I'll be going over something technical, math is involved, and I see blank faces, and I know that, I tell them, you don't understand it, like, I can see half the class doesn't get it. Tell what is it you don't get, and being intentful about kind of forcing them to ask those questions so I can help them and give them that feedback. Anything you wanna- No.
All right.
Thank you.
I appreciated your comment earlier about transparency. I feel like some of my students are struggling with always understanding what the purpose is or what the greater good is of an assessment or with an assignment that we've given. And so I've had to discipline myself to be more intentional about telling them before or afterward, this is why we're doing this.
Yep.
This is the skill that you're developing and sharpening. So that the students just aren't seeing every assignment in its own silo and not understanding the bigger picture of us trying to build a body of knowledge that's going to prepare them to enter into this field. So
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
toss it over this way.
So to kind of piggyback on that, I'm teaching a foundations class, so it's a very introductory class in the education department. And one thing that I need to be more intentional about is kind of talking about how this class is going to be a base for the rest of the program, because this is really their first contact with the education department, and trying to build something out that they go, well, okay, so I learned this in 203. Now, how do I spin that off into the 300 level classes, the 400 level classes, and into student teaching, and really being more intentional about kind of doing what I'm doing in the moment, but also trying to spin that out forward. I'm not going to throw it at you.
Well, for example, instead of just taking attendance by reading a list, I usually talk to every student in the class and ask, what's your name? And that way I know, well, what is their preferred name, because sometimes, Nick instead of Nicholas or whatever, but also if they have a different name. And also they will say their last name, which, English is not my first language, so I have no idea how to pronounce some last names, but they will say their full name. I was like, oh, that's how you pronounce it. Great. So that's what I do.
Thank you.
Well, I came up with a problem that seems like you had a solution for.
So he has a student that always asks for permission to ask him questions. And so I said, it just sounds like that she needs that validated, because somewhere along the line, she has gotten in trouble for asking questions.
Yeah.
And maybe it was someone like, making a joke out of saying you asked too many questions or something like that. But somewhere along the line, she's got it in her head where she shouldn't ask questions. And so I said, maybe and I mentioned that I really liked her idea of the thumbs up and stuff like that. I probably would never use it,
But it seemed, because I don't teach that technical of classes, I teach and I don't teach technical aviation courses, but anyways. And so, and I told him, I said, but I can tell you to be a little bit more intentional, because I do group, I do discussions in my classes, so I don't lecture. And so at the first day of classes, they break down into groups for 20 minutes and they do their group discussion. And so like, I'll often walk around, and if someone is making a confused face, I'll say, you're making confused faces. There's something I can help you with. And so and then they'll be like, oh yeah, and normally that's a question they never would have asked me, because then they would have had to like raise their hand or come and found me or something like that. So I told him, I said, just maybe be more intentional, like, as you like see them or whatever, ask them if they have any questions. But I also said that I can say all day long to be more intentional, and then there are days that I totally fail at it. So, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna add one last very quick thing. We're saying in our assignments or the lab instructions that ask your instructor if you don't understand this. And I grade them and I see that they didn't understand it. I'm not a primary instructor, by the way, so I'm just a secondary instructor. So a glorified teaching assistant. But still, they're explicitly said, there are messages there that says, contact us. I told them, I told them basically when my office door is open, you can walk in. I didn't even set an office hour. But it seems like, and you brought this up, it seems like they're just filtering that through, like maybe I don't qualify for this, or this situation doesn't qualify for this. I'm not gonna bother this guy, maybe, so.
Right.
So the words are not enough, like if you just put them there.
Right. I think you also have to show them like, it is really okay to ask me a question.
Yes.
Once that first person does it, then they see that, oh yeah, I can help you with that. Let's step back. Okay, let's start here. Okay. Then let's work through this together, just approaching it. And once they see that, yes, you're absolutely there to answer questions and help, I think them just seeing that with other students too. And then the word gets out that you are nice and will answer questions. All right, moving on.
Yeah, let's go
Okay.
ahead and move on.
So with our last few minutes, what we'd like to do is we have some scenarios, and maybe you have encountered these or maybe you haven't. Yeah, it doesn't like me. There's 4 total. But so what we're gonna do is my 6-year-old cut these up, and I want you to take note of these cutting skills because this cost me 30 minutes of my life. Last night. So every table's getting a different scenario. So there's 4 on the screen that you'll eventually see. But each table will have their own. So what we'd like for you to do is read through it and then kind of problem solve together. Like how would you approach it? So keep in mind the soft skills, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the right answer, right? So there are many ways to problem. Okay. So I would like for you guys to.
Did you need when you're ready to kick on the
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good question.
I love it, and it makes me happy.
Me too. I want people to find it useful. We need to turn Teams off. I keep getting all these like random Teams phone calls from like weird numbers.
Chat in case people are posting. There were the 2.
Oh, okay.
So we can monitor, we had, Travis and, I cut off.
Yeah, so we'll go AB for a group that had A, then B.
Yeah.
They don't have to, we don't have time.
No. Well,
Is this kind of how you were hoping it would go?
meet your expectations.
Did this meet your expectations?
They have ideas.
Okay, good as a bee.
Yeah.
Bees get degrees.
Bees get degrees. What is their next topic that they'll meet on?
Student support. Learning.
Yeah. That's actually a good follow-up to
That
this one.
is, yeah.
That's like genius sequence.
It's an adjustment.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
scaffolding.
Yeah.
We used to lead in, sometimes they're not quite
Ready.
ready for
Yeah.
all of that information.
Yeah.
So this provides them with context. and
Yes.
have the opportunity.
Love that.
Yeah.
I love that, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So at the end, I have some information about progress reports.
I'm gonna have to, I've gotta go back to Disney for like a 1:45 meeting, so when we're done, I'm gonna have to sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
And maybe we just have like volunteers for like each scenario, because I don't think we have time for everyone to share out.
Call them back. Yeah, okay. All right, guys, let's chat about this real quick. All right, so do we have a table that had scenario A that wouldn't, not mind to share your solutions to scenario A? I don't know who got what, so. Okay, and A should be on the screen so you can read what their scenario was. So attends regularly, makes frequent discussion, but they're missing assignments, did not score well. So what is the solution?
Approach it with empathy and, you know, normally a student like that, there's something outside that's affecting them and rather than saying, hey, you didn't turn this in, you know, say, hey, is everything okay? Anything wrong in your life? I mean, I had a student, a year ago that whose father was in hospice.
Yeah.
His first thought wasn't to reach out to me and say, hey, I'm not gonna be in class, or hey, I was there, but I, you know, missed this assignment, so. That kind of changed my mindset of making sure, approach everything with empathy. You don't, they live life just like I have life, so.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
idea. When I have a student like that, I'll usually send an email and I'll just be like, hey, are you okay? I didn't see you in class, or I noticed you just weren't yourself in class and you didn't turn this in. Is there something that I can help you with? And sometimes that opens the dialogue, or this is what's going on and this is why I haven't turned this in. But yeah, great response. Thank you.
I think a good idea while that's going on, I mean, we had the same way, to like acknowledge that, well, I'm acknowledging that you've been to class every time and you're contributing, you know, because if there is something they're struggling with and, you know, just amping them up about, you know, where they are succeeding on it might, you know, keep the momentum going to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Great comment.
I usually say something like, it's not too late to get back on track, you know, let's just meet to talk about a plan, or let's just, you know, talk about a path, so.
Awesome.
All right, how about scenario B? The ever popular group project. Group dynamics. All right, which group had B and wants to share out? Yeah,
Yeah, so what we talked about here is, you know, there's a lot of different strategies going forward, but the one that we kind of came to was speaking with student B and speaking with student C.
And trying to figure out if this is a workload issue or if this is more of a personality issue.
right, yeah.
And being able to work through it from there, because we've all seen it. If you have a group of 4, you have one student sometimes that does all the work, or 2. That's one issue versus just a personality issue of we all communicate differently. We all work a little differently. We have to work together.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, that's it.
That's a great idea. Go ahead, yeah. I was just gonna add, we didn't get this scenario, but I've actually seen this from the student version. Sometimes we lurk on subreddits and there's a student question about how to approach the teacher about this. And, I told the student, I said, just go ask them. I said, because sometimes they assign teamwork just to cut down on their own workload. And sometimes they do it because they want you to be working in a team. But if they did it just to cut down on their own workload, they're more than happy to let you do it on their own, or, you know, whatever. And so, I've seen that exact scenario from the student version, so. Another thing that I like to do in my classes, if I know I'm gonna have a big group project, of course, there's a self-assessment where they rate each other, all those things that can factor into mathematically somehow in the grade, however you wanna do it. But I like for them to take personality inventories or assessments and then kind of group them based on those. For me, that's lessened a little bit of the group conflict, but it is inevitable and it is a struggle if you have group projects, but I thought you guys had a really good solution.
Yeah. And I like to have them lay ground rules for their group. So that's the first thing they do, their first activity as a group is to come up with rules for their group. like what expectations are for email responses, for example. All right, I think we're ready for scenario C.
Did anybody have C?
We had scenario C.
Okay.
Is it up there? Is it?
It'll eventually get on.
Okay, so one of our regulars in our senior level class starts missing class, not doing their assignments, and is very quiet in class. Typically, the student is a leader, does top-notch work, and has thoughtful contributions to the class activities. How might you respond? So we felt like this was similar to the, was it scenario A?
Yeah.
With empathy, try to understand where they're coming from, reach out to see if there's something that you're not assessing that you can facilitate or help. Guide them back on track, judgment-free zone. You have to judge the character, judge the situation, but not the individual, make them feel like they don't want to respond because they're being dismissed or put down. So empathy, understanding, working, pulling them back into the fold, letting them know how valuable they are as a contributor to the class.
I really like the language that you use too, that they're valuable and kind of bringing them back in. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. All right, last but not least, scenario D. Anybody like to share? Did anybody get D? Somebody got D.
Somebody got
You got me.
Oh,
Okay.
there it is. All right.
A student in your general education class whom other students listen to and take cues from makes derogatory comments about the course topics aloud to the others. How might you respond?
Yes, how might?
Yeah.
It's a good question. That's how my first class started because I'm teach nursing and I teach the public health nursing. Well, all the nurses want to be what? Hospital nurses. They don't want to think about public health. So they told me, it's like, how many people want to be here? None of them. We're only here because this is required for our major. So my whole purpose now is to show them reasons, ask the reasons why they don't think it's important and slowly show them this semester how important it really is and that it's foundational for everything we do. But somehow they miss that from the hospital. So
Yeah, sometimes just changing that group think and figuring out what the spark might be for that is challenging, but figuring out how can we rework this narrative as we're starting with it not being useful, how can we make it of value to them? And that is very challenging. I used to teach gen ed classes. We have 2 gen ed classes in our program. And of course I find them valuable. But so I did actually have this scenario happen to me like one of my first 2 semesters. And so trying to figuring out how to shift that narrative and to make it valuable to everybody, and especially those who can influence in the class, because sometimes we see that as faculty. Yeah, that is very challenging, but I think you had a great response.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
all we're gonna make him do.
Yep. We're out of
We're
material.
out. I'm out. That's all. Friday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I will email all this information to you, but I wanted to note that progress reports, 4th grade progress reports are coming up. I'll share this information via email, but for those of you teaching full-term classes, which is probably the majority of you, progress reports are going to be available beginning on September 11th and should be entered by 1 o'clock on September 16th. Department chairs will be monitoring the progression, so as those progress reports are coming in, kind of check them off the list. But they'll also be sending reminders as well. It's important to have 100% completion and you'll score a lot of points with your department chair. If you have them in either on time or even early, they're available through my EKU and you'll see them on the faculty login. I'll send the information to you via email so you don't have to memorize that. Strive for 100% completion. I'll also share a reminder about some of the resources on relationship-rich education to complement what Laurel and Krista shared. And our next new faculty seminar will be on October 4th, 12 to 1:30. You should have a reminder on your calendar. We're going to build on this conversation, but focus on the resources to support student success. So we'll be visiting with Dr. Laura Vance, Dean of Students that day. She'll have a lot of good information for you. So I'll send you a follow-up email. It's fantastic to see all of you. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a fantastic, enjoyable weekend. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see.
That's all I experienced. It's my 10,000.
I think it's 15 time. I could see.
Right, yeah, and it was funny because during the. Yeah, it was like, maybe like Friday.
Like,